Mike Gatty, welcome to Executive Talk. How are you?
Aaron, I could not be better. Thank you. Well, given the COVID-19 pandemic, maybe I could be better, but
you know what? As long as you're still smiling, that's, things seem to be pretty good. So that's awesome.
I wake up every morning. I look at the new infection rates for the United States. I look at my specific local area, and every morning I think I'll take up day drinking as a new hobby.
You are probably not alone with that. So,
and then my business acumen takes over. I think, oh no, you cannot day drink. Wait till whatever.
You know what? If this is a no judgment zone. Feel free to drink, don't drink, whatever whatever works. Awesome, Mike. You are the owner of US Event Photos. Welcome for joining us on Executive Talk, the podcast where we get to talk about business, entrepreneurship, leadership, and anything creative under the sun.
Awesome.
So, so tell me what's going on with you. Where are you from? What do you tell me a little bit about yourself.
Well, I'm from the United States. I know you're Israel based. And
right.
And I'm totally ADHD. So one of my biggest challenges in business is when somebody sends me an email and they aren't from the United States, is figuring out what time to show up for the meeting. Because now you were very good. You said 9:30 Eastern time. Even then, I kept questioning myself. Wait a second, 9:30? Was that 9:30 Israeli time? No, that would be like 2 in the morning. Anyway, I live in Baltimore, Maryland, downtown Baltimore, Maryland, in a transitional neighborhood where we took a different approach with this house. My partner is master of buying houses and reselling them. And usually,
awesome.
Yeah, it's really cool. And I get to live in a palace for about 3 days before we, flip it and sell it.
That's actually a dream of mine. A dream of mine is to flip houses. I love that stuff. Love it.
I tell you, he is incredible in terms of just having this vision of being able to see something that nobody else can see and then making it happen and then selling it. But in this case, we did something a little differently. We bought a house in a transitional neighborhood, and which was completely redone. It's beautiful, but the neighborhood surrounding it has some difficulties. And so anyway, we're in the process of seeing how that all plays out. We're a few blocks from Johns Hopkins, and I love it. I love the diversity. My partner loves it. Some of my family will Anyway,
so when you flip houses, do you stay all within the same general area, or do you pick communities around the country? You're like, this week we're going to live in Florida, next week we're going to live in California, and then we're going to head towards Boston, and then who knows? We'll see what happens.
ADHD. So after about 3 years, and he's as bad as I am, he meaning Matthew. After about 3 years, we're like, I don't know, we could go to Portsmouth. Anyway, but and part of it is, US Event Photos, we work all across the United States. So as we travel the country normally under normal circumstances, we fly to 3 cities, 2 to 3 cities a week, depending on our schedule, and all across the US. And in fact, part of the hardest part of my job, often, especially considering that ADHD, is being in California and then the East Coast, and then California and the East Coast, blah, 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 back and forth. And that can get really grueling. But for the most part, we tend to cluster our events, which is always surprising to me that we'll have somebody call and say, do an event in Boston. And then 2 hours later, somebody will call and say, we have this event coming up in Boston. That's our schedule. And it is amazing how karma sort of groups things together usually, but that doesn't always happen. Anyway, as we travel, we keep an eye out for potential places that that part of that's really more of a hobby or a passion than it is a business. Yeah. Anyway,
now you have experience in journalism as well, right? Not just photography. Can you tell me a bit about that? What kind of work have you done?
Well, actually, my mom started the business. I own US Event Photos. It was originally called Gatty Communications. And my mom was a White House credentialed photographer from the Carter administration through Bush W. George Bush. Yeah. And in fact, I was just talking to her the other day because we were recounting how she used to say one day she'd be at the Rose Garden covering a event or press briefing, and the next day she'd be cleaning the toilets at home, and be like, "Really, Rose Garden?" And that's truly the case sometimes. But so I started in this household with a mom and a dad. My dad covered Capitol Hill. He was the youngest head of United Press International in their history. And and then he started his own business called Gatty Communications. And the idea was he'd do the writing and my mom would do the photography. Anyway, so I grew up in her darkroom. I can remember sitting there telling her about my school day as she was developing pictures of, Carter giving a press briefing on the Iran thing, the hostages. So that's how I grew up. We were so passionate about politics that we would take a pool bet on, and I was 10, on in the primary in Wisconsin on the Republican ticket for city council. It was like just the most politically Democrat charged household you can possibly imagine. So anyway, then I made a conscious effort not to get involved with the business. I didn't, I was rebelling. And instead, I decided to become a human resource person. And so I took a job at Target, and was happily doing that when the planes flew into the World Trade Center on 9/11.
Oh, wow.
My dad called me because he was editing a news publication at the time, and he could not get a photographer to go to Ground Zero to cover the rescue operations. No, everybody said basically, they hung up on him. And he said, "Look, I'm desperate. I know you're a good photographer. Just go." I was living in Salisbury, Maryland, which is 4 hours from New York City on the east coast of Maryland. I can't go. Anyway, so I talked to my boss at Target, and he said, take a few days. The store was basically shut down anyway because of the terrorist attacks. Go.
Right.
So I did, and on September 12th, I made it to New York, and then on the 13th, I walked from Times Square, where I was staying at a hotel, all the way down to the financial district, photographing along the way. And then I started talking to the really cute cameraman who was standing next to me outside of Ground Zero. Hi, how you doing? And we started talking, and the next thing I know is I was in the perimeter of Ground Zero where the rubble was of the actual towers. It was the only time I've ever been in a war zone. There was dirt hanging in the air. There were body parts on the sidewalk. There were people had jumped. It was absolutely unbelievable, atrocious. I can't.
I can only imagine.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So I kept photographing because that's what I do. It really didn't faze me then. Now I still have, dreams where I'm back there, but it did faze me. And that was the last thing, by the way, I shot on film. So I had to get those after I was done. Took those negatives, had them scanned, just the negatives processed, and I scanned them in using a scanner to my computer, all which was difficult in New York because everything was closed. Right. But I got it done and sent those pictures off to my dad, and then other magazines saw them and started to ask if they could buy them and run them, and that is actually what launched my career.
Wow.
So, yeah, it was simultaneously the highest and the lowest point in my life because you didn't want to feel like you were capitalizing off of this horrible thing that happened. But on the other hand, as I stood there, and this is absolutely true, all I could think of, I wasn't particularly happy in human resources, and all I could think of was, it can end any second.
Right.
So why not do something I actually like day in and day out? And so I called my mom shortly after that and said, "Look, I know you're having trouble. Everything's going digital. You're film-based. Let me come on board and help you. We'll have to share the client base, but, I'll help you grow the business into a digital platform." And that's what we did. And that worked for a couple of years all around DC, covering the Senate and, stuff
Right.
on Capitol Hill. And then as digital technology really took over, the Washington Post and all the other news outlets got rid of all their photographers, and it flooded the market. So then it became a supply and demand issue where, normally if your rate was $100 an hour, which is the going rate, that still is, which is the going rate. Well, whatever. Anyway, you had a choice. You could either work for $20 an hour, which was you could feed your family, or you could and work a lot, or you could keep charging what you were charging and work for a premium set of clients, which were harder and harder to find. I made a different decision. I decided that while Washington was overrun by photographers, I would hop on a Southwest plane, because you could get from Washington to Orlando for $49, and market in Orlando, where there weren't as many people working in any kind of photography at the time.
Right.
And I thought, well, $49, that's, it costs that much to park in DC. And it really does. You can actually fly across the country cheaper than you can to park at.
I used to fly from California to New York on JetBlue, $49 each way. I remember.
Right. So, what? So it took clients a little bit to catch on, because if they go, oh, you're not in Orlando. Wow, we're not paying your expenses. So I said, well, you don't have to pay my expenses. All I did was bundle the expenses, the hotel and airfare, into the rate, but I could charge a much higher rate because there wasn't as much demand. So that worked for. Oh, by the way, then that required a rebranding for Gatty Communications, which made no sense from a SEO standpoint. First, I did DC event photos, and then later, as I realized that the growth was across the United States, I changed it to US event photos.
Wow!
And the concept was, when somebody would type into a search engine US event photographers, that simply by the name we would come up at the top of the list.
Right.
Which
is very interesting, because if someone is in, let's say, Washington, they're usually typing in Washington-based photographers, not US-based photographers.
Right. 10 years ago, the key was to run microsites in each locale. So you would have DC event photos, and then hook that into the parent US event photos, and then market for DC that microsite. Now, Google doesn't seem to like that as much, so it's changed to running pages, and this is what we still do, on US event photos for each locale, so that when you type in Washington, D.C., and now it's not event photographers, now it's green screen photographers. When you type that in, or Washington, D.C. photo booths, or whatever it is that you're trying to market, that local page comes up. Doesn't work so well for Google Maps, which is a big search engine result driver.
Correct.
But Google will eventually catch on.
Well, the way to kind of work around that is you kind of set up a corporate headquarters with your set location, and establish that as your primary location. And then from there, we with branches and franchises throughout the entire United States. So no matter where you are, we have an event that that we can work for you.
Right, and that brings to branding, my favorite topic, because to me,
mine too. It's crazy how that works. Oh my gosh! Yeah.
To me, branding isn't just about your logo and your graphics and that kind of thing. It's about what is the soul of your business.
Correct.
What is the core guiding principle of your business, and then everything that I do, I try to reflect off of that soul. So. And remember, my background was Target, and that's how Target was. That's what Target taught me. And so, I think when you talk about working for the client, with the client, and as the client, that's what you're doing. You're talking about the soul of your business, and that's
100%. One of the very first things that we try to educate a client about is that your brand is not your logo. It's not your website. It's not the pretty colors that you choose. Those are components of it. but right, right, the way that you smile, right, right, that your brand starts from the very beginning. If a person were to mention the name of your company, how do I feel? What do I think? That's the start of your brand. Do I have a good, feeling? Not a good feeling. From when I pick up the phone to call you, what's my experience like on the phone? That's all part of your brand. And one of the most important things that we have to understand and help businesses and companies work in this way is that your brand reputation is huge. It is every component that you can possibly think of, from every communication, every email, every phone call, every interaction, every touch point, whatever you got. Your website, that's just another component, right? The ease of access that people could use your website on. How fast does that work? How well do you communicate? Do you get good responses? These are all aspects that go into your brand. And if you're not always working on that whole big picture, your brand is just always going to fall a little bit short.
Yeah, it's a 4-star instead of a 5-star.
Correct.
And it makes such a huge result on Google. And you threw in their website speed. What I found in the last few months with the new Google, algorithms, is speed is more and more important. Speed of your website is more and more important to your SEO results. And it never used to be that way.
Well, I'll tell you why. Because people are impatient. People expect, I'm not kidding, people expect immediate results, and if I come to a site and it takes 5 seconds to load, forget it, I'm gone. You already lost me. Like, I'm not waiting around, and then there's like, and then there's some, psychological component of, well, if their site doesn't work well enough, well, then what about the rest of the business? Are they also slow? Are they also not responsive? And so every touch point along those lines, right? And your interaction on a website, that's considered a touch point, right? Every touch point in your process of engagement with a brand counts. Site speed is definitely one of those components.
So you're like me. You work from Israel, correct?
Well, we have 2 offices right now. One in Atlanta, Georgia, and I run the office here in Israel.
And how hard is it balancing that international presence with your? It's difficult enough for me working in Baltimore and somebody talking about an event in San Francisco and having to get over that hump. Although we've gotten much better at it than in the past, but is it difficult when you're talking to a client and they're talking to you about something? And
No, but a part of it is because you have to prepare yourself for the conversation and for what the client wants. I spent a long time in America. I'm pretty versed with what's going on there. I don't talk like this still. I have the good accent. I good. And so when you're talking to a client, you have to know how to talk to what they need and what they want. And part of that is understanding who their audience is, where their location is, what's relevant to their location, and how all that works. And so like 10 minutes of research prior to a client call will make all the difference between sounding intelligent and up to date or sounding like you're an idiot. And today, with all these tools that you have, you could be anywhere and market to anyone, however.
Right. And I think smart people do. And it's one thing that's so frustrating right now about our current COVID-19 policy is they're taking this local approach in the United States with, down at the city council level, talking about whether or not to wear freaking masks. And it's the dumbest argument. We won't even go there because it'll take up the entire time. But the problem is that when you are a business that's focused on working, our major locations where we do events are Florida, California.
Yeah.
Oh, look, Texas. And so, when they talk about, oh, well, we're not sure we're going to extend government money because the only people that are affected right now are in the South. Most businesses don't have unless you're a beauty salon, I suppose, or something like that, that don't just have a clientele that is based in one geographic location. It's ridiculous.
Right. Well, small businesses who are community focused and community based. So yes, those are the people who suffered the most. But once your brand goes beyond your borders, then your opportunity really then increases. And the question becomes is how are you set up in order to accommodate that scale and that growth to allow you to succeed and sustain in that economy for those people, you know?
Right. So, you know, we will get through this. It may be 2023, but we will get through this. The question is, how do we survive until it?
Yeah.
And I joke, I actually anticipate things starting to come back online in 2021, and that's how we're prepared. It's frustrating to us because now, so what do you do right now to keep your business front and center in clients' minds that are more concerned with what's going on with, you know, the pandemic? And I can tell you what we do. We just keep up with our marketing in a very similar fashion as we would if things were normal, with this exception. We tailor the marketing to acknowledge the new normal. What a lot of businesses are doing, at least here in the United States, is they have this marketing campaign. One of the Mercedes, I don't remember which car thing, you know,
just name one. It's whatever. It's fine.
It's time. You've been waiting to hit the road. Now that time has come. The time hasn't come to hit the road. You have to market saying, you know, we'll get through this. The best the best marketing right now, the marketing that's representing the soul of businesses is that's saying we will get through this. Times are not normal, but they will become normal when we have to come out on the other end.
Yeah. So as it works, so you're a business owner and you're suffering, I'm sure, from the same components. And, you know, right now you're probably just hanging out at home thinking about how you're going to scale and grow and stay relevant and, you know, all those things. And I'm actually really curious to know, like, what are some of those components that you are involved with doing right now to help keep yourself relevant to your potential audiences?
We look every day, well, not every day, but every week we reevaluate guidelines as they're coming out and change when we do eventually go back to work, change how we will proceed to acknowledge what is going on and to maintain a healthy, safe, fun environment to do what we do. So by way of background, what we do is called experiential photo marketing, and it's predominantly through green screen photo executions at large events. Large events, of course, not happening, but they will. And so one of the things when we first come back, and until until this pandemic magically goes away, we are changing things. Like, we usually are known, and part of our brand is having these over-the-top props and over-the-top engagement where we're one-on-one with people in a very intimate and funny way, and having just a huge volume, turn up the volume sort of approach. And so it's difficult to say, okay, now we're going to have to back that off. We're going to eliminate props. We're going to have more of an individualized one-on-one kind of experience. We're going to have to make sure the line is social distance. We're going to have to not have the assistant standing next to the participant. We're going to have things done through technology so that there's distance between the two. We're going to have to think about masks, blah, blah, blah. However, we can do all that and maintain our super duper funny brand. We can, instead of having regular props, we can have digital props. There's no risk of transmission if you stick a bear in back of somebody. That's great. So the bottom line is there are ways we can change what we offer and what we do for as soon as the people are ready to go back to events, to produce an event that is cognizant of what's going on. The reason why we're back where we were back in April right now is because people weren't cognizant of what's going on, and they decided around Memorial Day that everything was back to normal and act that way. And so we as a company, when we do go back to normal, when we go back to business, can't act like things, we have to change what we're doing. So on our website, we talk about that. On our marketing material, we talk about that. On our social media platforms, we talk about that. And when we do talk to clients who are like, well, down the line, we're going to be doing this whenever things return, we talk about that. A lot of businesses aren't. I received an email the other day from an experiential photo marketing company, a competitor, discussing getting groups of people and crowds into your booth. Wrong message to be sending right now on a black.
Yeah.
That's what they're doing. So if you want to differentiate yourself from your competitors, this is the perfect opportunity to rethink what your daily steps of what you're
100%. 100%.
Yeah.
What we recommend to a lot of our clients, and people also call us up a lot for questions and consultations, and especially now during these times, one of the things that we're doing is we are offering free brand assessments and strategy consultation for companies who need a little bit of help about, well, how do I pivot and what do I do? One of the things that you know that's so important to understand is marketing has a set of tools, and most people operate within these tools, right? And so, PPC, social media, inbound, outbound, content, video, whatever you want. Okay, there's a whole thing. What sets you apart is not necessarily what tools you decide to use, but the strategy and the mentality that you apply before you get into those tools. Okay, how am I going to, right? What is the message that I want to tell people? What is the approach that's important? What do I want people to know about us and our business right now? And then how do I use those tools to appropriately get that message out to the people in the way that we want to tell that story? And so one of the things that we tell people all the time is, don't forget is that in circumstances like this, you are not alone, right? The entire world is experiencing this situation with us. And so the most important thing that you can do right now as a brand is be a human being. Be human. Think like a human, right? Don't go on like crazy, mechanical brand mode, right? You think if I was that person in that, if I was your potential customer, how would I want to be reacted to and talk to me, right? So there's this whole concept of business. There's B2C, B2B, right? And there's a whole understated component of marketing called H to H, human to human. And especially in times like this, when your message can reverberate in a realistic kind of way, right? That's how you stay relevant now. My sales might be down, that's fine. The world might be slowing down a bit, that's fine. For my industry, that's fine. But if you use this time to bet down on your human to human interaction as a brand, you'll see that not only will you fly now, but you'll continue to fly beyond, because you took the time to invest in what really matters, and that's your people.
Right. You just said one of the most important things is to remember we're all in this together. This is all happening across the world. And that's one of the hardest when you're self-isolated at home. That's one of the hardest things to remember, because you're in your own little bubble. Right. And so every day I say to my partner, Matthew, it's going on everywhere. And now is the time to just breathe. So the marketing we've been doing, you talk about human to human, it has been exactly that, has been, getting in touch with our best clients and saying, how are you doing? What's up? What are you doing? Is there anything we can do to help? And not even talking about business, because business right now is here in the large event industry in the United States, deader than a doornail. Put a fork in it, it's done. So, there's you might as well just focus on those personal interactions, because that's what's going to get you through. And our best clients. I got an email the other day from the marketing person at General Mills saying, "Oh, here I am next to the lake."
Yeah.
Okay. It was 2:00 in the morning, by the way. And I was like, I love it. That's really cool. I love that clients, the ones I haven't talked to in a year, will send me their vacation picture. And so, that human to human, what's up in your life. And by the way, I really do care. I'm not just like, tuning out when you talk, is probably essential right now, more essential than it's ever been, as far as
but you have to be consistent with it. In other words, you can't just play the part now and then when things are good, then forget about it. If you're investing in it, you have to always be investing in it, right? And one of the things that I teach my clients is that you're always investing in your audiences, because if not, you don't have a product to sell, because no one will buy. If you treat them like crap, then like they're not, they're not going to pay consideration to your product or service if you're not taking the time to invest in them back.
And that's why it's the soul of your business.
Correct.
The soul of your business. Not,
correct. Absolutely.
Because we're talking about who you are as a business, and then distilling that down to 5 bullet points and saying, okay, this is who we are. Bump, 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 bump. And then every single day living those bullet points is hard. But the best companies, the very best, Southwest, Target, Marriott, even though I think staying at a Marriott is similar to IKEA, but whatever, they have every day, their team wakes up thinking, how are we reacting today? And is that part of our soul, or is that just a reaction?
I have a question for you. Okay. So I love photography. Okay. I'm not professional in any regards. For me, it's a hobby, but I love life through the lens of a camera. Okay.
That's what photography is. If the reason I became a photographer is because I can't draw, I can't paint, but I can tell a story as how I see it at that moment in time of what's in front of me.
Amazing. So that's my question. When you're looking through the camera and you're setting up a shot, how do you decide photography is really the art of telling a story visually, right? So how do you plan that story? How do you prepare it? How do you tell it in your mind? And in your professional experience, how do you then display that story in a way that really helps touch people in ways that they didn't understand?
That's a question that clients ask all the time because they want to tell a specific story. The problem is that what you have to do as a photographer is let the story talk to you. You can't dictate the story, with a few exceptions. Because, I'm a business photographer. So one time, do I have time for a quick little story?
Absolutely.
Okay, good. One time I was working for Fact newspaper, which is a daily Warsaw news publication, bit of a tabloid, okay? And the first time I worked for them was to photograph Lech Walesa, the former president of Poland. And he was meeting with George W. Bush. And it was fantastic. I was part of the entourage. I rode in the limousine. Lech Walesa was sitting next to me in the limousine, directly next to me. His head of security, which happened to be his son, was sitting next to my immediate right. I was like this in between. And it was just one of these moments where you felt like you were part of history. And I had no problem photographing. It was the first time I streamed photos live up to the internet, and they were being published as I was taking them in Poland. And it was super cool. Remember, this was 2005. This was, not long into the internet age. Then fast forward a couple of years, the new president of Poland came to visit. I go, this is like, deja vu. This is going to be great. And the editor from the newspaper who I was working with said, we don't really like the new president of Poland. So we get a picture of him where he looks, drunk or stupid. That'd be great. And I was really kind of offended because that's not what I do. I don't take pictures of people where they look bad. I constantly make an effort to take pictures of people where they look good. So we're in the White House briefing room, and Thomas, who's the reporter, who I have a huge respect for, and who's sort of the Dan Rather of Poland, raises his hand, and the president of Poland calls on him. Yes, Thomas, they know each other, first name. Okay. And Thomas spoke very quietly, unlike me, who can, make deaf people hear him, and asked this question. And the president of Poland couldn't hear him. And so he, cupped his ear and leaned forward into the mic. I, of course, clicked the photo, not because I was trying to make him look bad, but because it was a photo. And the next day, or later that day, the headline was, "Are you listening, Mr. President?"
Oh my gosh.
Right. So, especially from a journalist standpoint, but also just from a photography standpoint,
Yeah.
what's in front of you dictates the photo.
Yeah.
You dictate the photo.
And what's interesting, what I find again and again is that, especially with the capture of a particular picture, it tells a story that you assume is happening based off the context of the picture. It could be totally out of context, but the way that like media in general, I'm not pinpointing anyone here, okay? But the way that sometimes media portrays pictures to tell a story that doesn't really exist, but the picture looks like it is.
Right.
It's so,
narrative.
Yeah.
Right. And so I, as a photographer, I consciously make an effort not to do that, with a few exceptions. Sometimes you're hired to do that, right? A brand wants. United Airlines, their old CEO, who looked very much like Anderson Cooper and was later thrown out of being the CEO because of Bridgegate in New Jersey. All right, I was his photographer, and we flew around the country, and he'd do these like meetings with the staff of United Airlines, the pilots and the flight attendants, and they absolutely despised the man. They could not stand him. And so my instruction from United was make it look like they love him. Well, because they hate him, But that said, you can take photos where you're not showing people actually, giving them the finger, and engaging with them. And so I was successful in doing that. And I wasn't telling a false narrative. I was sort of trying to polish and show a good corporate picture, because that's what I was hired to do.
Right.
A news photographer, on the other hand, is supposed to be showing what's actually happening. And so when you're taking a photo, you have to decide what is the narrative you're showing. And is it the actual events that are unfolding before you, or is it something that you have in the back of your head? Right. I prefer letting the story talk to me. Even if we're doing an experiential green screen marketing photo booth type of thing, and you have 10 seconds with that person. Right. I prefer talking to the person for a few moments and getting a sense of what they're about, so that I can set the photo up in a way that is both flattering towards them and telling a story that they want to tell, because they'll tell you the story that they want to tell, and then doing my best to set things up to capture that story. But you have to listen to the events around you and let the events and what's going on dictate what you're doing, and then deciding how to proceed from there. By the way, that's the hard part. The technical stuff, f-stop, shutter speed, focus, the easy part. Anybody can do that,
No, 100%. Look, I'm all about telling stories, right? How do you help brands tell stories? How do you help individuals tell stories? And that's a very challenging thing. But people respond to stories. Now, a story doesn't have to be once upon a time, ... right? That doesn't have to be a story. A story is a narrative that you help people understand. You bring people into who you are, you bring people into what you do, why you're involved with it, and you help them become a part of your picture, right? A good story encapsulates someone and brings them into your into your arms, like a big hug. And you have
two choices. You can bring them into your story, or you can tell their story. And sometimes they're the same, and sometimes they're not. And so it depends on whether you're working a professional and being hired to tell the person who hires you story, so you have to make that decision. It's a conscious thing. But I try not to lie. I try not to take photos.
No, 100%. No, look, and you need to be. You need to be honest enough first. And and a good successful brand, that's how they will start planning out their strategy, right? Before they start to apply all the tools that they want to work with, the very first thing that they need to do is figure out, how am I telling my story? And then once they're able to pull that out, and like I spend a lot of time pulling out those questions, helping people understand, putting it out there for them, and helping them appreciate the big picture in a way that could be consumable. right? That's the important part, consumable. Because if your content is not consumable, you're just standing on a podium shouting out loud, and so, and that's a very, very important part. Can I share a story, and then we'll say, okay. So we work together, right? Yeah. We did an event together in Boston a few years ago, and I don't know if you remember the details of this event. Can I tell the story? Is that okay?
Yeah, I think it's great.
Do you mind? Okay, I don't embarrass you. I don't know, whatever. So I was super involved with running this event, and we were hosting a social night in this like swanky artistic art studio thing. And I get there and I have things to do on my list, and I'm working, and I find you. I'm like, hey, how are you? Nice to meet you. I'm Aaron. Okay, cool. All right. So you set up, you have everything you need. Great. And I'm working. And I remember so vividly, you came up to me and you're like, Aaron, I am so impressed by you. And I'm like, huh? I'm like stuffing envelopes. Like, what do you mean? He's like, it takes a lot of courage to have an event in a place like this. And I'm like, in a place like what? What are you talking about? I was like, what? And you lean in, you're like, there are penises everywhere. And I was like, what? It's like, what? It's like, yeah, they're everywhere. And I'm like, what are you talking about? And I look up for the first time and I realize that the art exhibit plastered everywhere. It was in the wallpaper, it was in the art, it was on the wall, it was on the ceilings, it was on the floor. Everything was themed out to Pride Month. And I was not paying any attention to it. And you're like, it takes a lot, like, good for you. And I'm like, thinking to myself, oh my God, we just invited 150 people to come, to come have a party. And, like, what's that going to happen? And, and everyone came and it was just cool. Nobody cared, like it was just an event. And it made me realize so importantly is that people's, narratives and push points are so different. And that when it comes to art and when it comes to storytelling and when it comes to marketing, you got to be willing and able to push the boundary a bit, because you might think, oh my God, I can't do this. What's going to happen? Da, da, da. But what you don't realize is that there's an entire audience of people that are just totally normalized and appreciate the variety of what comes into play.
Well, there's two thoughts I have. One is being a breath of fresh air in the event industry is always a good thing, or almost always a good thing.
Right. Okay.
And there are plenty. How many cocktail parties have you been to at the Marriott with the battery operated tea lights and 3 open bars and beige wallpaper?
Yeah. More,
they
more
all
than I could count. Yeah,
completely blend into.
Correct.
I can tell you, when I was watching Bernie Sanders during the Iowa returns, I identified what hotel he was in and what room he was in because of the carpeting. That gives you an idea. It was the Holiday Inn, by the way. Anyway, so when you come across an event that is held in an alternative space that is done with a breath of fresh air, meaning not the normal corporate speak, it is absolutely refreshing. Now, talk about telling the story with the photos. As I was covering that event for you, I didn't focus on the penises.
Correct. You actually asked me that. You're like, should I be focused? I'm like, no, people, focus on the people.
You can edit that story and tell you. The photos did show an alternative space in Boston, in a city that wasn't your typical corporate cutter event.
Correct. And personalities, whether you're a personal brand or a corporate brand, personality is a big sell. It is, because people are bored of the same old. And when in a world where there is so much of the same, and you're asking yourself, well, how do I stand out from that?
Right.
Part of it is being able to find your own voice and personality that you're willing to project.
It took me 15 years as a photographer to learn that. When you're at the Senate, they beat you into no, be down on the floor, not, blend in. And so I always thought, when I started working DC events, I always said, oh, I have to wear a tie, I have to do this, and I always tried to put on what I called my Republican face, and you know what I mean, cut, whatever. And then when our business, US Event Photos, really exploded, and we started working for companies like HBO and Stars, and not just NBC, Will and Grace, those sorts of clients. When that happened was because when they called up to talk to us in the initial contact, we let our personality show, and we said, hold on a second, HBO. You want me to do something with Game of Thrones? Really? Ask me anything. Anything.
Right.
Anything. I've read Game of Thrones 15 times. I've seen it 20 times. I can out-geek you at your event. Ask me anything. Dead silence. Oh my God, you're perfect. At that point, then, by the way, the discussion isn't one about price, right? Which is every photographer's worst nightmare is, what do I charge for services? The discussion, once you get into this is us, this is what you're getting, becomes one of, okay, now,
But that's a general principle of sales also, but that's a whole nother conversation for a whole nother time. But that's awesome. Mike, I want to say, I love talking with you. This has been so fun. Thank you so much for coming on Executive Talk with me. I loved chatting with you. Anyone who is watching this, you need to check these guys out. useventphotos.com is the place to go. They will travel anywhere you want them to be and will really make your event stand out in ways you have never seen before. It has been a pleasure. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Aaron, totally. I had a blast. Thank you so much. I really do.
Awesome. Let's do it again. You're on.
Absolutely. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Mike. Have a great day. Bye.